Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ian McKechnie. I'm a Director of Strategic Programmes at the Advanced Services Group. And we'll be starting the webinar very shortly, just once we open up the gates to allow all the delegates to access the Zoom platform. This webinar will be recorded and you will get sight and access to the webinar in a day or so. Enjoy yourself this afternoon, and I'll be back with you shortly. Just give it a minute or so just to let the participants settle. The numbers are still climbing, so just bear with me and I'll be back in about 30 seconds or so. Right, let's start. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ian McKechnie. I'm a Director of Strategic Programmes at the Advanced Services Group. It's my pleasure this afternoon to introduce and host the webinar on identifying the right customers for servitization. We have two very successful speakers with us this afternoon. The first one we have is Dr. Parikshit Naik, who's Business Development Manager with the Advanced Services Group. Just a little bit of background about Parikshit. He actually was a PhD student with the Advanced Services Group at Aston Business School for a number of years. He specialised in the use of Internet of Things in a servitization context. When he finished his doctoral studies with the group, he then went on to become a research assistant on one of our Innovate UK funded programmes focusing on next generation rice milling. And he made a very successful job of that. As a result of that, he then currently works in the business development manager role, but he's also working with Baxi Heating to help them build a digital servitization demonstrator to demonstrate heating as a service, amongst other as a service models. And I'm delighted that he's also a visiting industrial fellow at Aston Business School. Then we've got Gavin Hindle, who's Commercial Director from Byworth Boilers. Gavin will take you through perhaps a little bit more detail in his career this afternoon as he goes through. But one of the things I'd like to point out at the very start is that in 2016, Gavin and his team at Byworth Boilers won the Queen's Award for Enterprise Innovation. So they're very, very well versed in the adoption of innovation in different guises. And I'm hoping this afternoon that you'll hear a lot more about that practical journey that Gavin took. Just a little bit of kind of background to the Advanced Services Group. We're led by Professor Tim Baines, who's our Executive Director. Tim is the #1 academic in the world in the term servitization and advanced services, and has authored more than 200 publications on manufacturing strategy, including the book Made to Serve, which transformed a lot of the manufacturing sector. Our centre has been on the go for 10 years now. We're based at Aston Business School in Birmingham in the UK, and we provide education, training and research to a global network of like-minded professionals that are interested in moving from a product-centric world to a services-centric world. Some of the businesses that we've worked with over the last 8-9 years or so are shown on the screen now. It doesn't encapsulate all 450 or so that we have worked with, many of these intensively, but it gives you a flavour of the range of sectors, from aerospace to digital technology, some Japanese firms, some UK-based firms, some Scandinavian firms, some Dutch firms. So firms from global networks, firms from local networks. But they all have one thing in common. They're all looking to accelerate their growth and success through the adoption of new services to support the product in use. But one of the things that we find often is that there's this big elephant in the room. And I think there are four main questions that people ask us when they're interested in exploring what servitization might mean. The first question is, what is servitization? And we can easily explain that through all the mini guides that we offer on the subject. The second one is about how will this help my business? The third one is, how will it help my customer's business? And the last one is really more pertinent, I think, to the majority of businesses. Will it make me more money? Will it help me reduce costs or gain more customers? So the work that we are going to take you through this afternoon started from a mini guide that Parikshit was an author on, which is our customer segmentation for servitization mini guide. And we have reduced the shop price of that until Friday this week. So if you do want access to one of these guides to get a flavour of what we do, then that's where you would find it. But he was co-authored on this mini guide by Jim Eichner. Jim is based in the US. He was ex-vice president of global innovation at Goodyear Tires, and he's now an honorary professor with our group. But Jim was instrumental in helping set out the shape of the segmentation model that he had applied over many years in practice. And Parikshit picked it up and applied some of the servitization and advanced services research models around about the mini guide. So it's my pleasure now to hand over to Parikshit, who will take you through his section to tell you much more about the when, the what, and the how of segmentation. Parikshit, over to you.
Thanks, Ian. Just waiting for the control to be handed over. And I'll take everyone through some of the key ideas on segmentation. Thank you very much, Christina, for the control. So Ian mentioned the elephant in the room, what is servitization? And just to start off that conversation, I think we'll use this services staircase. So this is a framework that we've used for quite a long time and has been used by a lot of our customers now, where they have started adopting this and making their own staircases to match what their offerings are. What this staircase shows is a journey moving upwards. The higher up you go, you can see it is increasing the potential for value creation, or rather value co-creation as well. And this journey of moving up the staircase is servitization. In this process, what you do is you create or you bundle up several different layers of services. What you can see at the very bottom, the two steps in orange are what we call basic services or base services. The ones in purple are intermediate services, and ones in blue are advanced services. And I have focused specifically on those blue and maybe just a bit of the top of the purple level. So just a bit of the intermediate and the advanced service section. This is where we see the highest potential for value co-creation, and evidently also more risk absorption. The idea of servitization is that the risk sits with those stakeholders that are best placed to absorb that risk. And when you are trying to create, as a business, as a product business, when you're trying to create these advanced services, you are trying to become closer and closer to the customer, to the user of your product. And in order to achieve that, you need to understand why they use your products. What does your product help them achieve in their own business? What kind of problems it solves for them? What kind of value it adds to their business? And if we want to get to the bottom of that, it means that we need to understand our customers much better than the very traditional ways of grouping them, which is why we realized that traditional methods of segmentation might not be enough or appropriate for these sort of services. If we are to understand how we can add more value, we need to understand where are the gaps within the customer's business, where the value is missing, where there is potential to add more value. And then where does segmentation really fit in the broader journey of this, say, servitization or an advanced service business model? If we look at a holistic perspective of the business model, this is just a small piece of what we call the business model blueprint. You can find more information on that, about that on our website as well. So on the right-hand side, you'll see the 5 key sections of the business model blueprint. The top left-hand side, marked in the circle, is the value creation with customers, blown up on the left-hand side of the screen. The pink section is the value delivery or the service delivery system, where you are understanding the resources and competencies required to deliver this specific value proposition that is denoted in blue. The orange one is about how do you capture the value along with the customer, and what other forms of value can you capture beyond just monetary value, beyond revenue. The green is the competitive landscape. This is to understand what are the internal and external factors that could affect this business model and make it a success or hinder its progress. And at the bottom in the dark blue is the business model success criteria. Here we try to understand what are the success criteria that we would like to decide for this specific value proposition. Now you see that all of these components are very interrelated. Each of the components go back to what the value proposition, that specific value proposition is. And you will see the value proposition in the right-hand side of that blue box of contracted outcomes, contracted conditions, and accepted risk. What these 3 elements are based on are the pains and gains of the customer. And the pains and gains of the customer are really based on the exact customer segment. So you could say a very instrumental and key step in establishing this holistic perspective and creating an advanced service business model is identifying the right customers. It is about understanding that specific segment, and for that segment, what kind of value proposition will we create? Then what does it look like in practice? It is basically very similar to what this diagram in front of you shows. There are a bunch of customers with different needs, different attributes that you have been serving, or you might not have served as of now with your current offerings. And what you want to achieve is a grouping of these customers based on the commonality of their attributes. Now, it is not as simple as grouping them together the way it has been done on this diagram. When it comes to advanced services and servitization, it is about understanding the customer's business, their needs, and what really creates value or reduces value for them, which is why we delve a bit deeper into that layer of customer insight. If we look back at how customer segmentation has been defined over the years, there are several different definitions. You will see year by year they have evolved, but having a very common, I would say, thread between all of them, which is about heterogeneity, that there is a heterogeneous market out there, and we are trying to find commonality. What that commonality is based on really defines how effective the segmentation technique is, whether it will make it or break it. So for our purpose in the world of servitization, we are looking at that definition at the very bottom of the table, looking at a process of subdividing heterogeneous markets to identify differing customer behaviors, which reflect varying priorities in customer needs. So you see, we are trying to bring in the element of customer behavior as well as customer needs, and trying to match that and create a sort of customer persona which is suitable for advanced services. Traditionally, what we see a lot of businesses doing is sort of these 4 types of segmentation techniques: going for geography, picking up regions and thinking we are going to address the customers in the UK, then there is a customer segment in France, there is a customer segment in the US, in China. I'm sure a lot of manufacturers and product businesses have come across this and have been using this for a long time. There's demographics, customer industry type. You could look at standard industry classification that is very easily available on government websites. You could be looking at the size of your customers. You could be looking at the revenue that your customer generates and grouping them together according to that. Psychographically, you could be looking at their culture or the customer's values, whether they buy only from people around them, whether they buy very locally, how is their decision making? Is it centralized? Is it regionally done if they are a multinational organization as a customer of yours? Or it can be also done behaviorally. So looking at the reasons behind why they buy your product or how they use the product and services. How do they behave around your product? What kind of mistakes they made when using your product? However, using such techniques has its drawbacks. If we are looking, for example, at geographic segmentation, we might fall into the sort of a rabbit hole of just prioritizing those customers that are closest to our service centers, are closest to our resources, because it helps us reduce our cost or optimize our operations. There might not be anything wrong with that. That is a very clever way of making sure that you reduce your cost at the same time addressing your customers' demand. But are you really adding value to the customer by just being closer to them? How does that help them be more successful? Because if you're thinking of advanced services, that is the whole objective, is to help your customer be more successful, be closer to them in that way. Demographically, you could be looking at revenue, as I mentioned, but how does looking at revenue or how much revenue that customer has given you in terms of orders help you understand their needs? It really doesn't. It doesn't tell you much about why they buy it or how they use it, how better they could use it, or how your product could add more value to the business operations of your customer. It only tells you that this customer has been buying a lot, so they could buy more. It is helping you internally make decisions. It's not really adding value to the customer. And you could also end up forgetting about some of the customers that you haven't been able to address, or the needs of the customers that you haven't been able to address. Maybe with new value propositions, such as advanced services, you have better chances of addressing some customers that you never had access to before. And to understand this better, and then to segment the customers specifically for servitization, we created a new set of criteria, a new process. I won't take you too deep into the process today. When we launched the mini guide Ian mentioned at the start of the webinar, there was a walkthrough in which we demonstrated the process, and I think it is available now on YouTube as well to watch. But you can have a look at the mini guide itself and you'll get a better idea. But to give you an idea, a clearer picture of what these criteria are, if I am so critical about the previous ones, well, how does it work for segmentation, for servitization? What we recommend is looking at customer business drivers, and we take these into 3 categories. First is value creation drivers. So here we're looking at drivers that are directly linked to creation of value for the customer's business, or sometimes even reduce the value for the customer's business. I've put in some common examples. Let's look at, say, maybe energy consumption. Does your product or the amount of energy that your product consumes in the customer's business dictate how much value they create as a business? For example, if you were a truck manufacturer and your customers are haulage companies that use your trucks to take products from A to B across the UK or across the world somewhere, it is very likely that the biggest cost driver for them, the biggest value driver for them, is the fuel cost. How much fuel does your product consume? And depending on how driven your customers are based on that fuel cost or that energy consumption, you can try and group them together. Similarly, regulatory drivers. Are there any regulations or regulatory constraints around the use of your product that you can use as a way to group your customers? Very useful. The third one is adoption attitude drivers. These really define the customers who are most likely to co-create value with you. These are customer attitudes and their propensity to adopt innovation and change. And Ian very rightly mentioned Gavin's and his team's award for innovation. It really is an example of the customers that are likely to engage and adopt innovation more openly. Some examples could be the way they use your product or their eagerness to outsource. These are some of the adoption attitude drivers. And some customers might even come and ask for certain types of services. Maybe that is a very good entry point for you to say, these are the type of customers we want to work with. Now, a lot of these drivers are not something that you as a business or you as a sales manager or these positions, you might not know these very readily. This might involve conducting some exercises and understanding them better through customer interviews, etc. But it is important that you understand them so that you can segment them better. And finally, once we have these drivers, we match them with the manufacturer's or the product business's ability to serve. What kind of resources and competencies does the business currently have to address the customer's business drivers? It doesn't mean you're creating a value proposition. You're just trying to understand, do you have the resources and competencies to address these, or do you have the willingness, rather, to address these drivers? You might not have those resources immediately, but if you have the willingness, you could build, you could develop, you could buy those resources if there is value to be created with the customer. And as a last point, before I hand over to Gavin, is what happens if we don't do it this way? Or what happens if the customer segmentation is wrong? It is possible that a manufacturer takes their first steps and decides these are the customers, these are the type of customers that we want to go for based on standard industry classification or geography. They identify one customer from that segment and they realize, okay, we want to start a pilot with this customer. They create a value proposition with that specific customer on their needs. After that, when you're trying to scale up, the value proposition you have created is based on that customer's needs, but the rest of the segment was a standard industry classification segment. It does not necessarily, the value proposition does not necessarily represent the needs of that entire industry classification. So your scaling process is now faulty. You might not be able to replicate this value proposition, and you might have to create several bespoke value propositions for several different customers. That is exactly what you don't want to end up with. The whole point of customer segmentation is to find that homogeneous small piece of market within the heterogeneous pool so that you don't have to create several value propositions. You want to have a group of customers that respond very similarly to the same value proposition. And that is why it is important that the customer segmentation is done very systematically and it is understood thoroughly as the first step of servitization before you get on the journey of creating value propositions and delivering them. And I think at this point, Ian, I'll hand it over to you to introduce Gavin.
That's great. Thank you, Parikshit. And thanks for the detailed description of the differences between the traditional models of segmentation and the new models, bearing in mind the advanced service context. Just while we transfer control of the screen to Gavin, I'll just remind everyone that Gavin is the Commercial Director of Bioworth Boilers, a manufacturing SME based in the UK. And Gavin has worked with the Advanced Services Group for a while now, and I'm hoping that he can share some of his stories about that experience and why it's so important to buy with boilers. So over to you, Gavin. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to Ian and Parachute to provide this opportunity for me to talk about Bioworth boilers and to also talk about our journey along the servitization roadmap. If I got control there. Excellent. So Bioworth Boilers, who are we? We were founded by Dennis Baldwin in 1968 and are still a family-owned business with the third generation of the family actively involved in the business. We're an SME with annual revenues of around 14 million, employing 130 people within the UK. Our core business is the design and manufacture of industrial steam and hot water boilers, and all our products are made in the UK from our manufacturing facility in Keighley, West Yorkshire. We also manufacture other products to support the operation of boilers and also offer other services such as site installation, commissioning, reactive and proactive maintenance, spares and training courses. We operate throughout the UK and have sales and service offices in Glasgow and Birmingham. And our products are mainly supplied within the UK and Ireland. However, we do export a small percentage of our goods into the Middle East and North Africa, South Asia, and Australia. As Ian and Parachute alluded, we developed our own in-house technology offering. That's the Bioworth Unity Control System, which was awarded the Queen's Award for Enterprise and Innovation in 2016. Many industries and manufacturing processes use steam and hot water as a heat source for cleaning and sterilisation, and producing steam efficiently can reduce water and fuel consumption and save on operating costs. Steam and hot water systems are found in manufacturing processes, food and beverage production, pharmaceuticals, petrochemicals, paper and packaging, commercial laundries, and in hospitals. So I'd like to expand on our servitization journey. We've always closely monitored other companies that are well along the servitization path, and in a previous life, I've worked closely with other companies and seen their journey. And we've always paid particular attention to Rolls-Royce and their power by the hour approach. But initially, as an SME, we believe we may not be well positioned to embark on the servitization journey. And often we've asked the question, if we were, where do we start? And our starting point was the Made to Serve book, and that's a book that I read, and it really was thought-provoking, and it facilitated the review of our existing business model, and it gave us the belief and the confidence that we could embark on the journey to servitization. And the factors that gave us that confidence are highlighted on the slide here. So, we are an OEM with a technology offering which facilitates operational data collection and condition monitoring. Our assets are critical to the customer's process. For example, in the distilling sector, the boiler is often referred to as the heart of the distillery. We already offered base level services beyond manufacturing, such as site installation, commissioning, training, spare parts, break fix, and planned maintenance activities associated with the regulatory inspections. But more importantly, we believe we could create value to our customers, and we had early evidence of this in the form of case studies demonstrating our fuel savings to customers following the introduction of our technology offering and close collaboration with our customers around their process demands and patterns. So on this slide, I'd like to expand on our customer segmentation experience. So like Parachute said, our approach was very traditional initially, and our customer segmentation was really based on sectors. So we segment customers by the sectors: food and beverage, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, and we had some minor segmentation by geography, particularly around our export clients. But when we reviewed our customer base, both existing and potential, with the backdrop of servitization, we began to segment by various factors such as value curation, regulatory drivers, and the customer's potential appetite for a value type proposition. As part of this process, we looked at our customers' behaviours. So, i.e., customers that were reactive or proactive, so customers that just needed steam, or customers that were more focused on fuel and efficiency metrics. We also looked at their approach to asset care. Was it a long-term or short-term approach? We also looked at their systems design and their acceptance for redundancy to be designed into the system. But we also, more importantly, looked at, can we create value by our interventions? And can we create value in terms of reduced downtime, fuel savings, efficiency gains, and also those efficiency gains based on performance and operational in terms of the resource to use or manage the boiler, and capitalise on our experience via these interventions. And this segmentation exercise resulted in what we call the Bioworth life cycle. And at this juncture, this is the key graphic we use to segment our customers. A selection of our customers will embark on the full offering of our life cycle services, and they'll place one PO with Bioworth to complete the design, manufacture, site installation, commissioning, spare parts, service, and training. Others will take a selection of our life cycle services, while others will only procure a single service. For example, training. I'll just go back to that slide because it's jumped for some reason. This process really enabled us to highlight potential customers for a value type proposition, and also enabled us to look at the potential scalability of our offerings, and particularly a value type proposition. So why did we choose ASG, or the Advanced Services Group? Like I spoke to previously, the initial introduction came through Professor Tim Baines, and I read his book and then reached out to Tim and said, look, we believe we can do this. How do we start? But more than that, we were, as an SME, we were attracted to the Advanced Services Group, as they already had an established SME program. Therefore, we could use their experience from such a program, working with other UK-based SMEs, and also provided us access to a peer network of like-minded SMEs. The methods are practical and hands-on, and as engineers, we were attracted to that because we're very tactile in our thinking, but also grounded in the latest academic research and real industry insight. But one of the most important things to us was ASG understood the potential of our technology and service offerings, and provided the conduit from academic research to industry impact. And that was the most important thing to us. So to summarise our experiences today, we've obviously commenced on the journey, and we're working closely with the Advanced Services Group. We work closely with the Advanced Services Group to develop our own specific transformation roadmap and you can see the roadmap there on the slide, which is included in the mini guides. We're progressing apace against the roadmap, and we're currently running a pilot scheme with a customer to trial our value-based propositions, and we plot that against our own specific service staircase. I think we're constantly reflecting on the journey, and we acknowledge that the transformation from base to advanced services will be a challenging journey, but it's one that we believe we will find ultimately rewarding. And that's the end of my piece, and I'll hand over to Ian.
That's great, Gavin. Thank you very much for that. We do have a number of questions that we'd like to pose to you and to Parikshit to kind of bring out some of the richer details of your experience and your journey. But perhaps once I take control of the screen again, if I may, I'll pick up on the Q&A slides. And I'll pose the first question to Parikshit, if you don't mind, Gavin, just to give you a chance to kind of reflect on your own experiences. But Parikshit, you're heavily involved in segmentation as a co-author on the mini guide. Would you say that it was suitable for all manufacturing firms?
It's a tough one, Ian. I would say there's very few factors that would indicate it is not suitable to all manufacturers. We have come across some examples where when the products are heavily commoditized, it can become a challenge. Yeah. But it is really about identifying those specific customers, even with those commoditized products, where you can add additional value. And just to give you an example, we have worked with a business that was involved in manufacturing packaging material. And something as simple and as common as packaging material can easily be considered commoditized and can barely add additional value beyond helping your customer protect the product they want to package. But if we think about the type of businesses they could work with, they realized that there is a certain segment of customers which use their packaging to help transport extremely high value products such as car engines and other automotive components which have huge value. Any damage to such products can really reduce the potential value they can have with their end customer. And a safe delivery and a very well-timed, adds immense value to their business. It relates to that first value creation driver that I mentioned, that they found that customer where they could really add substantial value to the customer's business. And they said, this is the customer we want to work with, and that's where we'll create an advanced service value proposition. For the other customers, it doesn't mean you don't get anything. Your product business doesn't stop functioning. It is an understanding that advanced service is for a specific segment of customers. So there are examples where even very tricky industries have been able to navigate this journey and find the right customers. So I wouldn't say I wouldn't give a blanket statement that it is for everyone, but as long as you can find that right customer, servitization can be suitable for you.
Okay, thanks, Parikshit. Can I just check? We've got a question in the chat function from Akint Varia. Akint, you've asked about whether we will send the recording of the webinar and slides to everyone. Yes, we will do that in a day or so. But if you have a secondary question, if you want to drop it into the Q&A function, I'll pick it up from there. Gavin, we have a question from one of the participants, and it's Jacques Dupries, and he's asking, this obviously requires a significant amount of upfront capital. How did you secure finance to move to the provision of advanced services?
Yeah, we're obviously still early in the journey, and it's something that we, in terms of how we budget for that, we set a budget each year against that transformational roadmap. Some of it we've got grant funding for, and some of it is financed through cash from our own operations. But we recognise this journey is several years in the making, and it's about allocating budgetary funds each year to spend accordingly against our roadmap. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I believe it does so, Gavin. That's really helpful. Thank you. I think I've got some questions of my own, if I may pose them to you. Have you been able to use your new way of segmentation to find faster or more effective ways to scale your service offer?
Yeah, I think we have, and the life cycles really focused, really allowed us to segment customers, and provide that scale. We know which, we know now which customers have the appetite for that, and we can scale accordingly against that. Obviously, we are seeing some demand from our customers, and the more we collaborate with them, and the more we work close to them, we understand that there's a need there, and that has presented us with a magnitude of scale.
Okay, thanks, Gavin. I'm just going to take some other questions now from the participants. We've got one from Jenny Road. Jenny's asking if she wonders if it could be harder for a startup to begin with a servitized offering, access to capital notwithstanding. Can it take a bit longer to get a market to adopt? Do you have an experience of that?
Do we? I believe it. I believe that it is viable for a startup, and I think as we go on this journey, and as we again get closer to our customers, we understand that there is that potential there. And like I said, on our roadmap, we're not envisaging converting all our customers onto a value type proposition, and the transformation period will be quite lengthy, but and it will be a case of small steps initially, because in terms of changing our business, we're going from a very capex driven type sale to a more relational and advanced services, and the risk profile changes on that, and also your cash flow profile changes as well. So we are almost on that transformation is in effect very similar to a startup, because we are changing our business model quite significantly.
Okay, thank you. Patrick, I will come back to you in a second with some other questions I have for you, but there's a couple have just popped in that I think are really pertinent, Gavin, to your pitch earlier on. Jeremy Jones has asked if you could provide a bit more detail of the specific segments that you created and the criteria that you applied to that. And a supplementary question to it was, and also, have you changed your segmentation since you started out? So, for example, did you collapse any segments into one, or the reverse, did you break out a single segment into others? So is there anything you can help us with there?
Yeah, I think we segregated. We looked around. Customers' liquidity as well. So we looked at and that's how we segmented the customers. It was in terms of appetite. It was, have the customers got the liquidity, and also the right culture to adopt a value type proposition, because we're talking about engaging with this customer for if you look at the life cycle of a boiler, if it's looked after correctly, it's 25, 30 years in operation, or has been known to be. So you're not just looking very short term, you're looking, can we engage with these customers on a relationship basis for that sort of duration? So the way we segmented it was all around, can we create value? Have they got the liquidity to support such an offering? and also have they got the appetite for it. So that's the way we looked at our segmentation. And at the moment, we have that in the backdrop, but at the moment, as we go along, we've got the life cycle, which we use currently throughout the business, but, looking forward, that's how we're segmenting our customers along, following the segmentation exercise we did with ASG. That's how we've got them currently segmented. Did we collapse any? From memory, no. But I think we tried to, and Parachute will probably expand it because he helped us along the way, but I think we tried to do too many segments, and it was almost a case of let's just narrow this down and get this to a couple of segments so we can really focus our thoughts and focus and really get accuracy around the customer segmentation before we move to the next step.
Yeah, Ian, if I could just add to that point, I won't give away too many details of Gavin's segmentation. I think they're quite commercially sensitive, but just to reinforce, yes, I was very closely working with Gavin and the rest of their team in doing the segmentation. And to Jeremy's question, they used the criteria that I spoke about because that was the process that was we were planning to go through. So it was about value creation drivers, regulatory drivers, and the adoption attitude drivers, and what is Byward Boiler's ability to serve those three criteria of that customer segment. And yes, so as Gavin mentioned, there were quite a few segments that we started off with, Gavin. And yes, we ended up with 2 segments, which spanned across a couple of original segmentation, SIC sort of classification. But yes, it was based around liquidity of who has more liquidity or limited. But I wouldn't go into too many of the details because it is servitization or advanced services are something that manufacturers differentiate themselves on. So I wouldn't give away differentiating details for Byward Boilers.
That's a very good point, Parisha. Thank you. Gavin, if I may come back to you, we've got a question now from Andreas Schroeder, and this is moving us towards perhaps a digital question, and there's a supplementary one from another participant that I'll maybe blend in. But how feasible is it for you to have different customer segmentations for product, for service, and perhaps for digital value? And if these are all possible, what are the costs and challenges around that?
I think they are possible, and it's something we look at. I think, yeah, I think the challenges around it will be more around cash flow, because as a manufacturer, your cash flow is very shark tooth, is up and down, and and technologies can be, if it's subscription based, can be quite flat. So I think we'd look for a mixture of that, because that will support cash flow. But I think our ideal is to provide the product with the technology offering, and the technology offering is key. As we go down the journey, we realise that our technology offering is very important, as well as our own internal technology offering, because what we've realised through our journey is, yes, our technology offering that we put on our products is important, but we also need to reinforce our technology internally to support this journey.
Okay, so can I maybe perhaps drill a little bit deeper then, Gavin, with Chang Kim's question, because they're asking, well, first of all, they're acknowledging thanks for a great presentation. So some of those have been very enjoyable from a participant perspective. But the question is not so much about segmentation, but they are wondering whether any digital servitization components have been applied to Byward, such as real-time monitoring or real-time assessment. Is there anything you can share on that?
Yeah, well, our technology offering does that. We get all that data back currently from most of our assets, and that was one of the real drivers or real sort of factors where we thought we could go on the journey, because we already get some of that data which enable us to provide condition monitoring analysis. Some of it is very smart as well. So some of it, does protect the asset and, does look after the asset. So we were already along that journey. And so that's one of the factors that gave us real confidence.
Ian, could I add a quick one to that?
Yeah, of course.
Very good question from Chang. And the elements of remote monitoring and remote diagnostics, or even remote maintenance, were very much considered as part of Byword's ability to serve. So we saw them as enabling tools, but not value propositions themselves. So when we were able to find out what creates value for Byword's customers, or what are their regulatory drivers, we found out that Unity, with its own capabilities, can address some of these value creation drivers, which meant that the segmentation that we're doing, the grouping of customers that we're doing, will be scalable. So yes, it was very much considered a part of that. But as Gavin mentioned, Unity was already there as a very crucial tool within Byword Boilers as a resource. And we use that to our advantage within the segmentation technique.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Gavin. Let me pick up on a kind of supplementary question that Jenny has now posed based on her earlier question, where she was asking about the time to market adoption. And our recent question is, Gavin, in your experience, have you found that customers find a product purchase an easier buying decision than that of a perhaps longer term service commitment?
Sorry, can you just repeat that question, Ian?
Yeah. Have your customers found it much easier buying your product and finding that an easier buying decision than that of buying a service commitment over the longer term?
I think historically, yes. But what we are seeing now in the market is we are seeing that trend and that appetite from customers to go down a service offering. And that again gave us the confidence to go on the journey, because we could see the demand, albeit it was very small, but that's because were we necessarily asking the customers that question. And I think as we go down the journey and we ask, we're almost communicating the customer around that, we are seeing that demand there. So historically, I think yes, but now we are seeing customers more comfortable with that, and something that they will look for. Okay,
thank you. And perhaps a pertinent one for the wider group, and this is an open question to you as well, Patrick. How do you recognise if the customer segmentations are not right? Are there any indicators that you get?
Gavin, you go first.
Are there any indicators? That's a good question. At this stage, I don't think we're seeing any indicators, so I don't know whether our segmentation is correct. But at the moment, I think that's too early to tell from our perspective. I don't know if Parachut's got any experience from other SMEs or other exercises.
What we have seen is it sort of relates to the next step after segmentation. You have to take a few steps forward before you realize something has gone wrong in the segmentation. So if you've finished your segmentation, the next thing would be to identify a very trusted, a very loyal or very appropriate customer that represents one of the segments, your target segment, and then approach them for, say, a pilot to, or rather some interviews to understand their pains and gains. And after that, you would then create a value proposition with them. And after that, you would start to pilot this value proposition. While you are doing that, you could be having parallel conversations with several other customers. And then within that target segment, if within that segment, you are understanding that the pains and gains of different customers are different, that means they do not represent the same segment. And that is when you realize that your segmentation has gone wrong. Because even within the same target segment that you chose, the needs of your customers are different. It is likely that you'll end up creating different value propositions for them, which means segmentation has gone wrong. It is good that you identify that at this point, because once you have scaled up or once you have finalized your value proposition, you might have put in a lot of investment before you realize something has gone wrong and we have to go back on the roadmap, take a few steps again. So I would say that is where you realize something has gone wrong, when you hear about different customer needs from the same customer segment.
Okay, thanks, Parikshit. Thanks, Gavin, for that one. I've got an interesting question now from Kevin Radden. I know Kevin's based out in Switzerland. Kevin's asking about the experience of perhaps providing different models for some customers. So, for example, one customer that is using the servitized-based model or outcome-based model, and some that are not. Are there particular challenges of running parallel business models and processes?
I don't think so, and I don't believe so. And I think when I first started on this journey, did I think we'd have all our customers on a servitization type value type proposition? Probably not. And I think we'll have a blend. And I think I don't want to start banding figures around how many customers we believe we're going to convert, but I think we'll have a very blended customer base. And if you look at Rolls-Royce, I believe I think they only have a certain percentage of their customer on a power by air contract, and they still offer very traditional services and business models. And I believe we will follow that same route.
Okay, thanks, Gavin. There's an interesting one here from Chris Maliapad, and a little bit picking up on this digital connectivity again, Gavin. So Chris is saying servitization requires more and more digital equipment and knowledge to provide and support the services along the services staircase. And he's asking, is the level of digital maturity of your customer also a factor for segmentation for you? Or do you believe it will become more important in the future?
I think it will become more important in the future. I think what we're obviously looking when we are doing our value type proposition, it's almost saying to the, because we're taking more risk on, we will want more digital equipment, more monitoring equipment, because in some instances, it depends what commercial model we use, we could still own the asset. And so it's therefore we'll be looking to protect that asset as well as make sure that asset is performing to its optimum in terms of outputs and efficiency. So I think in short, yes, it will become more important. And I think when we're looking at our value propositions, we're looking at in terms of technology, we're going to push the envelope, and it's going to we're always going to be putting the sector leading monitoring equipment into our propositions.
Okay, thanks, Gavin. And perhaps just a closing question for you both. Is there anything in your experience, Gavin, in terms of working with Parikshit that you would like to share that was particularly beneficial? And likewise, Parikshit, is there anything that you experienced by working with Gavin and Byworth Boilers that you think perhaps other firms should be taking note of?
Gavin first.
Thank you. Look, Parikshit's been great to work with. I think he has an engineering background, which helps. So when in our sessions, we do, to our detriment, start getting very technical and very nuts and bolts. So that's helped. And combined with that, engineering discipline is also very patient, which helps. Because and also from his previous work, he understands the technology and the IoT, and obviously that's very important to us as well. So far it's been a good journey with Parikshit. and a very enjoyable one.
Thank you, Gavin. And for you, Parikshit, very briefly.
Thanks, Gavin. I think what sets Byward Boilers apart really is their attitude towards innovation. So if I was to apply my own segmentation technique to my own business, Gavin would fit and Byward Boilers would fit as a great customer because they have that adoption attitude. The same adoption attitude drivers that we ask our customers to use in their segmentation. I think that is a key point. And in addition to that, it is the vision that Byward Boilers have, that they are not looking at advanced services and servitization as a solution to their today's problem or tomorrow's problem. It is a challenge they have taken on themselves that they see will bring them potentially gains and other potential revenue down the line, 5 years down the line, 7 years down the line. It is a long-term project, and they know that, they have acknowledged that. They don't see this as a quick win, because it won't be a quick win. And Gavin knows the story very well about that.
Yeah. Well, that's a really positive point to end on for both Gavin and Parikshit. And I'd like to extend my thanks to them for taking time to join us this afternoon to share their experiences and their insight. Christina, for all the hard work behind the scenes to make these webinars happen. And just to confirm that we have our next hosted webinar on customer value propositions for servitization coming along on the 1st of June. If you're interested, please feel free to register. Would love to see you there. And thanks again for your time this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.